It was kind of funny this morning. I was just looking on YouTube, and something that came up in my feed I hadn't run across before. Nothing I'm subscribed to, but it was a series of pictures, like of cities and buildings and stuff from like 1961. And it was kind of interesting, you look at it and you see, how things used to be, how nice and clean and, things have really changed. What really got me, as they're going through these pictures, it was kind of a slideshow kind of arrangement. And there was like Las Vegas and stuff, and that was like at the time the racy thing, but not too racy. And like LA, and it was a clean town and not all this terrific traffic, it was just a car here and a car there, it was, and it wasn't the homeless encampments all along the sidewalk. We have really fallen a long way. But what partly got me, as I was watching this, here comes a picture of Fargo, North Dakota, the biggest city in our state. And, one of the pictures was outside of the Woolworth store. And I remember going into that Woolworth store. It was cool. They had everything, even a lunch counter. And I think one of my cousins worked there for a while, was working at the lunch counter. But I guess, you get feeling nostalgic how nice things used to be. Certainly there was some sort of dark side to this, but you didn't see it. There probably was some evil going, but it wasn't so obvious, I don't really recall. We had our drunks, like there was an NP Avenue that if you went down there at night, it wasn't violence, it was just drunk bums walking back and forth, and it's the life they had. It wasn't a big thing. And I used to know the cop that walked that beat, and he knew all these guys, and they were all good guys. They'd work a little, get a job here and there, get enough money to buy a little booze, but they weren't stealing. Now, it's really, it's really gone downhill. Just amazes me. I know in these small towns, like the one small town we used to go, I think it was Friday night. That's when like all your farm workers got paid and stuff, so everybody was feeling rich, and they'd keep the stores open until 9 o'clock, and they'd have sales and stuff, and everybody would be in town. It was a small hardware store, a small town, but they had like 2 hardware stores, really good hardware stores with actual hardware in them, and clothing stores and department stores in a small town, and you could do it. And they made a living off of that. And hired people, and it was jobs for local people. And I was trying to think, where did this really go so downhill? And it really goes back to when Nixon got it into his head to open up trade with China. Then you got all your Walmarts and your Kmarts selling all this imported stuff, and just drove your local businesses out of business altogether. But it's really sad to see. Those people in them little stores, they used to sell quality stuff, stuff that would last you a while. But then we started getting all this import stuff. You know, that was flashy for a year at most, and then it was junk again. I guess it got me feeling a little nostalgic because of that, you know, the idea of how it used to be really nice. You know, I guess like when people watch, what is it, the Andy and Mayberry, you know, that's kind of how it was, you know, back then. And I guess people watch that and they start feeling, you know, what happened? I think we opened trade with China, and I think that did us in. You know, I'm sure at the time, well, the idea was, oh yeah, we trade back and forth with them. They don't want nothing we got. So it was kind of all one way, and it still is all one way. But it's a shame. You know, and I guess, you know, you really can't go back to that, though people try. You know, I think there's even people on YouTube here that they try to live like in a 1950s, you know, they dress that way and, you know, they surround themselves with that stuff. And I can see, but it's, you know, I can see the idea of that, but I think that is just gone. You know, you can pretend that it's not, but then you look around you and oh my God, you know, it's horrible. But I do, you know, I don't even know if there is even a Woolworths anymore. You know, we used to buy clothes there and shoes, I remember. And they had an escalator, which is, ooh, you know, that was something else. But there was the Sears and the Pennies, and, you know, it was all in the uptown area. And now uptown is nothing but hipsters, you know, and there's nothing up there for me. Well, even when I say about hardware stores, you know, there was a hardware store in a small town here that was really great. There's a few of them in small towns. You run into hardware stores that are trying to stay going, you know, and they'll have real honest-to-God hardware, not a whole bunch of import cheap stuff, you know. They struggle, though, but it's just so great to walk into them, you know. It takes you back to when things were that way. But I know they did a survey not that long ago. If people thought that things were going the right way, and it was like 75% of the people said no, you know, that things are going in a bad direction. And what amazes me is that 25% of the people, approximately, thought things were going just hunky-dory. You know, that amazes me, that you can look at what's happening. But I think they have lost the perspective. They don't know how nice we used to have it, so they don't have anything to compare it to. But boy, we have lost it here. You know, our country. I mean, there was a reason that people wanted to come here before, you know, foreigners, because this was really a nice country. But I don't know why they want to come now. I guess it's just for the handouts, because this ain't what it was. I guess, you know, in one of those pictures, they showed some hamburger joint with 15-cent hamburgers. You know, and I remember back when you could go, we had these, like King Leo's, they were called. There wasn't a McDonald's around at that time. That didn't come till later. with this King Leo's, you could go in there and get a cheeseburger and French fries and a chocolate malt for 50 cents. You could eat a whole meal for 50 cents. You know, now you go in there, you ain't going to get out of there for under 10 bucks in a burger joint like that. And it ain't like the food's all that much better. You know, it's just... But I remember, you know, dime pop machines and stuff, so I guess I just... You know, I remember too clearly how it was, how things worked. And then I look around and I say, it don't work anymore. You know, this is just a mess. But honestly, I think once we opened trade with China, it was all downhill from there. And now we depend on that. That's a hell of a thing. But I wanted to get that off my mind. You know, those pictures, it made me think of how nice things were growing up at that time. And like reading in the comments of other people that grew up in that time too, saying, God, you know, how they just hate to see what's happened, how nice it used to be. And people now, if you weren't around for the 50s and 60s and even in the 70s, when you start getting into the late 70s, things just went to hell. And even early 70s were starting to go to hell. But that's right when they opened trade, like in 72, something like that. Things just went downhill from there. All the little towns, all the stores folded up. There ain't hardly any of them left. You go in these little towns, nothing going on in them. I mean, maybe they have a bar struggling and the bar changes hands about every 2 years. You know, tough to make a go of it now in a small town. But at one time, it really worked well. We were the envy of the world. We aren't anymore. We certainly aren't the envy of the world.